You added insulation to your attic, and the attic is still 130 degrees. The ceiling is still warm to the touch at 8 in the evening. The energy bill barely moved. You did the right thing. So why is nothing working? Here's what most people assume. More insulation means a cooler house. R30 wasn't enough, so they go to R49. R49 isn't enough, so someone out there is quoting them R60. And the attic is still 130 degrees. The insulation is not failing. The insulation is doing exactly what insulation does. The problem is that you're asking it to do something it was never designed to do. Think about this for a moment. You're lying in bed and the room is getting warmer, so you pull a thicker blanket over yourself. Does that make you cooler? No. The blanket slows heat from escaping. But if the source of heat is underneath the blanket, with you, the blanket becomes the problem. That is what is happening in your attic right now. Insulation resists conduction. That's its job. Heat tries to move through a material, and insulation slows that movement down. Every point of R value adds another layer of resistance. But here's the thing insulation cannot do. It cannot remove heat. It cannot pull 130 degrees out of an enclosed attic and send it somewhere else. It can only slow the rate at which that heat crosses the boundary into your living space. Slower is not gone. When the sun hits your roof deck on a July afternoon, that deck can reach 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 65 Celsius. The radiant heat comes off the underside of that deck, and if your attic is sealed, it has nowhere to go. It accumulates, hour after hour. The air in that cavity climbs to 120, 130, sometimes higher in a western or southern-facing attic with no shade. Now that heat is pressing against the top of your insulation. At 130 degrees on one side and 78 on the other, the thermal pressure is enormous. R30 slows that transfer. R49 slows it a little more. R60 slows it a fraction more again. But none of them stop it, because none of them remove the source. Here is the math that most people never see. Going from R20 to R30 cuts heat transfer roughly by 25%. That's meaningful. Going from R30 to R49, maybe 6 to 8% more. Going from R49 to R60, maybe 2 or 3%. Each upgrade costs roughly the same. The returns are shrinking fast. Meanwhile, correcting ventilation in a sealed or underventilated attic drops the air temperature inside that cavity by 8 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes more. 8 to 15 degrees off the source, before the heat ever touches your insulation. That is not a marginal gain. That is structural relief. So what does a ventilated attic actually look like? The principle is simple. Cool air enters low, at the soffits along the eaves. Warm air exits high, at the ridge vent at the peak. The temperature differential between inside and outside drives a continuous exchange. Physics does the work. As long as that path is open and unobstructed, the attic never has the chance to accumulate the heat that puts pressure on your insulation. Your R value works against a smaller load. The system works with you instead of against you. Now here's where the second mistake happens, and it's a quiet one. Many homeowners add insulation, and, in the process, block the very intake path that ventilation needs. Insulation gets pushed to the eaves. The soffit vents get covered. The intake is sealed without anyone noticing. The attic now has insulation. The R value slows the heat transfer. But the heat source is larger than ever because nothing is moving air through. This is why the ceiling still feels warm. This is why the bill didn't move. The insulation did its job. The system around it was working against it the entire time. There is a simple way to check this in your own attic. On a clear day, in the early afternoon, go up and hold your hand near a soffit vent. You should feel air moving. Not a breeze, not a draft, but movement, a gentle draw pulling air inward. If you feel nothing, the intake is compromised. Insulation blocking it. Debris. A misaligned baffle. It doesn't take much. The other check is at the ridge. If your attic has a ridge vent and no air movement at the soffits, the ridge vent is exhausting nothing. It's decorative. Both ends have to be open. The path has to be clear. That is the system. Now, when does more insulation actually make sense? There is an answer to that, and it matters. Once ventilation is working correctly, once the attic is no longer accumulating extreme heat, additional insulation genuinely helps in cold climates. In a Minnesota winter, in a Manitoba farmhouse, a well-ventilated, well-insulated attic keeps heat inside the living space where you need it. The insulation becomes the ally, because now it's working with a managed system rather than fighting a sealed one. The sequence is what matters. Ventilation first, insulation after. In that order. Most people do it backwards. They insulate first, seal the attic in the process, and wonder why the second upgrade didn't help. The cost of getting ventilation right is not large. Soffit vent baffles to protect the intake path cost $2 to $4 per bay at any hardware store. Home Depot, Lowe's, a local building supply. A full ridge vent replacement on a standard ranch runs $80 to $150 in materials. That is not a luxury upgrade. That is correcting the foundation of how the system works. Compare that to the $1,500 someone spends going from R30 to R60 in a sealed attic to get maybe 2 or 3% improvement. The expensive solution is fighting the wrong problem. Before you schedule that insulation upgrade, spend one afternoon in the attic. Check the soffits. Check the ridge. Check whether the intake path is clear from end to end. If it isn't, you don't need more insulation yet. You need to let the house breathe first. Before you add force, read the flow. The fix was always there. You just couldn't see it.